Being late. My name is Suzanne Siemens, and thank you, Nita and Tony, for jumping in and getting us started. So I think I was listening in, and our session is limiting waste, so thank you for joining us. We have Tony DeRosier from Abeego and Nita Tanda from Dalcini, and they have, I think, introduced themselves. And I'm Suzanne Siemens, one of the co-founders of ISLE, and Madeline Shaw, my co-founder, is also joining us. And so we're just going to do a quick intro to say what we are doing to support eliminating waste. And all three of our ventures are supporting SDG number 12. And so we are taking care of our planet. And we are living in a time where things are disposable. Everything's disposable, and it's all about convenience. And yet what's not convenient is the alarming fact that we're living in a climate emergency. And we need to do things now. So very briefly, ISLE is a period care company, and we are making sustainable alternatives to disposable pads and tampons to replace the 20 billion going into landfills every year. Menstrual pads in particular are made up of 90% plastic, and nearly all tampons contain some amount of plastic. And these all take 500 years to biodegrade. So our goal is to get rid of the disposable issue in our period care and solve that problem. And so, Tony, why don't you take it away and tell us what problem you're solving?
Sure. So I make Abeego, and Abeego is a completely natural food wrap that basically mimics the skin peel or rind. So we are working really hard to prove that while your food wrap needs to be breathable and it needs to be protective, it absolutely does not need to be made from conventional wasteful materials like plastic wrap. And as we show the world that plastic isn't the right way to store food, we're also proving that natural materials are the right way to store food.
And Nita, tell us what you're doing.
Well, the thing is, everyone's got food storage in their home. What we don't generally think about is that it is a lot of plastic in our home, in our kitchens. And we've often thought of it as being sort of an environmental issue, which it is 100%. It's also a toxic issue. And so, when we look at, there's 900 chemicals that are going into making those different types of plastics and resins and all the paints and dyes and things that we're putting on there. We're not really thinking about it, and we really should. And even, there's a lot of manufacturing will come out with whatever the key new thing is. So, first it was eco, there's an eco container, but they're not really eco. I mean, what we really need to start thinking about is, where does that, first of all, when we're putting food in it, what chemicals are getting into that food that we're ingesting? So how are we harming our health? And the other is, when at the end of life, where is that piece going? And if it's sitting in a landfill for 500 years, it's now contaminating our soil. And the microplastics are breaking up and they're getting into our fish. Now, 33% of our fish right now contains plastic, and we are then consuming that. So, we really need to start getting away from just looking at environment. Yes, it's important, but it's both. We cannot be healthy in an unhealthy world. And so even if you say, oh, the environment isn't a big issue for me, it should be, because it's also your health and the health of kids, of families, of more vulnerable. It should be a bigger issue than it is.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next thing I'd like us to comment on are, what do you feel are some of the opportunities in your sector to have a bigger impact at either the business or consumer level? And I'll start by saying at ISLE, we have come a very long way in helping to overcome that whole ick factor of reusables, especially in period care. And that there are a number of new companies that have come into the scene and really helped to elevate the category of reusables. But what we're trying to do in terms of an opportunity is to talk about, not only are our products reusable and sustainable, but we're really looking closely at the supply chain and how our products are made and the textiles that we use to make them, because in apparel in particular, and in each of our sectors, we can't ignore the fact that a lot of the products that are being used that are reusable are actually very synthetic and derived from fossil fuels. And so at ISLE, we are looking at more natural ingredients like organic cotton, or if we have to use polyester, we use recycled polyester, or we use tencel and fibers that are made from plants and not from fossil fuels. So Tony, would you like to talk a bit more about what opportunities you see in your sector and the impact that we as consumers or businesses can make?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we've seen since 2008, when I invented Abeego, we've seen beeswax food wrap become kind of like this worldwide trend. So everybody's making it. We're making all kinds of different versions of it, and prints and formulas, and some of them last, some of them don't last, and there's a lot of conversation around beeswax food wrap and how it's the alternative to plastic wrap, and we're starting to treat it like an alternative to plastic wrap, which makes it a little bit lower value in the consumer's eyes. So they're not as careful about it. They're a little bit more wasteful with it. And I think the real opportunity within our industry is to help people understand the true value of the materials that go into making what we make. Like beeswax is absolutely precious, like so precious. It breaks my heart when I see, beeswax food wraps coming on the market for $6 a piece, because quite frankly, they cost a lot more than that to make, just in the materials and in the humans that do the work to create them. So that's something that I would love to see on my side of the food wrap, is that we can never be priced at the point of plastic food wrap. It's impossible, and it's irresponsible, to be honest. And the other point for us is that we are constantly looking at our manufacturing so that it becomes circular manufacturing, and we make a lot of decisions around circular manufacturing. And it's part of the reason why we have a very limited selection. We make one print, we keep it very focused, because that allows for us to have this really strong, clean, circular manufacturing facility.
Great. And Nita, how about you? Why don't you share with us what those opportunities and things that we should be doing are?
I think we need to rethink quality versus quantity. And I think very similar to what Tony was saying, is that we need to start looking at what are the materials. And if we're going to look at quality materials, they are going to cost more. And we have to get comfortable with having pride in the things that we buy, being comfortable to reuse them, and not continue to go down the path of that throwaway culture where you just keep getting a new one, and then throwing it off to have it sent to some other country to take care of. I often say if we threw every bit of garbage into our own house, we would stop a lot sooner. And I think we need to do that. We need to start rethinking everything in terms of how we purchase, how we pay for labor, looking at the entire supply chain, and being okay with having something that is plain. I mean, there was a time where we used to have cast iron pots, and grandma used to pass it down, and we had pride in it. And for me, I would love to see us purchase to a point of having pride in the things that we get, and not just be, oh my God, I got this at a discount price, and that be the level of excitement.
So true. Yeah, I think we're facing all those same frustrations around this notion that everything needs to be the cheapest possible, or the flashiest possible, and it's not taking care of how things are made and what's behind the brand. So the next topic I'd like to talk about is, tell us more about some of the system changes that you are working on, or what do you feel is necessary to see real change happen. And for our part in Isle, in addition to highlighting some of the supply chain issues that we're talking about, we are also addressing the real cultural issue about period shame and promoting period equity. And by that, we mean just normalizing the idea that people have periods and they don't need to be a taboo topic, and we don't need to be embarrassed about them. And then also being body positive, and making sure that we are being really inclusive around our periods, in terms of not all women have periods and not all people who identify as women have periods, and that there is a very broad gender spectrum about that. And making sure that our products are gender affirming and size affirming. And those are kind of system changes that need to happen. And we're also working on period equity, and making sure that people who have periods have access to products, and that reusable products don't have to be only for premium folks who can afford them, and that you need to make your products accessible to people and make them affordable. And so we do that through our community giving program and some of our community impact work. So Tony, do you want to talk a bit about things that you're thinking about from a systems perspective, and what we need to see in terms of change?
Absolutely. So the vision behind Abeego is to keep food alive. And if you think about what that means, there will be a future where we don't need food wrap the way that we use it today, because we have an incredible agricultural problem. Our food, the way that we produce food and consume food and transport food, it's very, very broken. So on a household level, we like to help people understand that everything you know about food freshness today is been told to you through the lens of airtight food wrap. And the concept of airtight food wrap doesn't exist anywhere in nature. So I want to leave you with one thing, that there's no such thing as fresh food. There's living food that eventually dies. And all along the way through that journey, there's a certain nutrient availability to you. And so what we're trying to do is help people understand what it means to keep food alive through a breathable and protective barrier that actually changes what you understand about food. So a lot of the things we think about, like that slimy lemon, the browning avocado is a great example. There's just so many concepts about that brown avocado we don't even understand, because we understand it through a flawed material like plastic wrap.
Amazing. I know I love my Abeego and I use it as gifts for everybody I know because it's such a valuable product. Nita, tell us about the system changes that you feel are important.
Well, again, I feel like I don't want to repeat everything that Tony said, but we really believe also that food really needs to be its natural form. You don't need to suffocate it. And so, we get a lot of people that say, "Oh, how come you don't have plastic lids to cover your stainless steel?" And quite frankly, we don't want to go that route. The other is, if we can have a product that is entirely recyclable and that lasts a long time, but at some point, you just want a different variety. You want something different. It is 100% recyclable. And it's recyclable because we haven't added any paints or any other colors. We haven't mixed the materials. We don't have a different lid and sections that have, lead joining it. We don't have any resins on the inside. It's really important for us to keep our product very clean. And so that now we've just actually started a program where any returns or any waste product, we now have a facility here in Ottawa that we recycle all of it. So now we are a circular economy. And the other thing of system changes is, when we wanted to get into retail stores, a lot of them wanted packaging, right? It has to look pretty on the shelves. And I really tried to argue that we don't need that. Again, just like we want food to be really natural, we also really want the product to seem very natural. I understand you need to have some kind of protective something around it. And so I was very, very happy to see that there was a company. Now, you have to remember, when I started this 5 years ago, no one wanted to hear it. And so I really stayed as an online business, and I kind of grew that way. But the conversation of environment has really transformed over the past few years, so that now I can engage in those conversations and say, this is what I'm proposing. And so super happy to see system changes actually happening now.
Awesome. So those are the formal part of my questions, and I wanted to invite the listeners here who have joined us. If you have any questions, or throw it in the chat, or there's a comment section. We'd love to hear what you're interested in, or things that you want to explore as us individually as founders, our entrepreneurial journey, anything that you're curious about. But maybe while we're waiting for some questions to pop up, Tony, do you want to share anything that's been challenging in the past year as it relates to both maybe COVID and eliminating waste, and how those two have intersected, or just anything you've noticed this year, past year?
Well, I mean, the new, like the renewed interest in cooking and eating and baking and all of the things that we've had around food and COVID has actually been really beneficial toward helping people understand the concept of keep food alive with Abeego. We kind of often get kind of like considered a plastic wrap alternative, which is not an area where we enjoy living. So that this newfound drive for food wisdom and food understanding has actually been really helped our message around keep food alive really land this year.
Okay. And I see we have a question from Lauren. She asks, what do you have as some tips for zero waste? And I'll start by saying it starts in every room of your home. It could be zero waste in your washroom, in the case of period products. And, and it doesn't have to be a full on completely going zero waste. It can happen part-time. It can happen one day of the month. It can happen for one meal or one lunch that you're packing is what I would say. And so start small and experiment. Nita, do you have any tips on going zero waste?
I would say don't call it zero waste. I think it's too big to achieve that. And, I can say that I got into this business not because of environment. I got into it for health. And so sometimes, for whatever reason, it's about making changes. And I think making changes that are small. Then what I soon realized was making those changes weren't as difficult as I thought they were going to be. And, so we have Abeego at our home and we don't have any plastic wrap and we haven't used it in quite a long time. And we have lunch containers that I actually started for my daughter when she was in kindergarten. She's now in grade 5. And so we've never had to buy a new one. And when you see that success, it just breeds more change. And, when people come in and they go, oh my gosh, that plastic drawer that everyone has of all the containers that are, mismatched lids. And when they see mine and they say, yeah, but where's the plastic? Like you can't live without it. It's actually very, very, very doable. So my recommendation is just start with one thing, see it change, and then gravitate to the next one.
Yeah, yeah. And Tony Esmeralda asks, how do you pitch systems change to retail businesses? You've been in retail longer than Nita, and Nita's definitely got her feet wet in here and had great success, and you've been doing it longer. How have you attracted retailers?
My consumers have attracted retailers, to be honest. I mean, Abeego's had such an incredible word of mouth. Abeego says what it does and does what it says. And so if you've used Abeego, you've experienced this like extension on the life of your food, and you've experienced like this great you've experienced at work. So we find like word of mouth, like people are just asking for Abeego. So a lot of times the retailers are reaching out to us. Getting into the grocery sector has been challenging because again, they want to put us in the plastic wrap aisle, and Abeego is just never going to be super successful next to saran wrap because the price point is such a barrier. So we've had more success with the systems change by pitching them to put us in the produce aisle. Mm-hmm. So Abeego wants to live where fresh food lives. We don't want to live where the food killers live.
Right. Anita, how about you? How have you penetrated retail? Because you've pivoted from online and gotten into retail with some great success recently. What's been your formula?
Well, first of all, I asked the stores what was their absolute must-haves on the store shelves. And so they said, well, we need to be able to have case packs. We need to be able to send it to our different stores. And so I said, well, if I came up with a solution, would you be open to looking at something other than wrapping it in plastic baggie and off it goes? And they were open to it. So I, just made sure that my solution also worked for them. So it wasn't just a win for me and a lose for them. It was a win-win. And so now when I send my, for example, Indigo, that's the company that I worked with, my belly bands work just fine. And everything is in cardboard. There's no plastic when I'm sending it to my retail stores. And it feels really good. So now everything from where it's manufactured to when it comes to me to when it goes out to the end consumer, we've not introduced plastic in any of that.
Awesome. And let's round it out because we have 2 minutes left to just comment on what's your vision? What would you like to see in 10 years, either for you or your sector? And for our part at Isle and in the period care sector, we would love to see that reusables are not considered taboo and weird and icky, and that we would love to see that period care is considered a right and a part of healthcare and not some thing that we don't not talk about, and that all people are included. And that we really want to see people really being conscious consumers and not just choosing the cheapest and, most flashy brand, but really taking care about who you're doing business with, because brands like ours, all the SheEO ventures, they're really trying to make system changes and to really think carefully about why we're doing the things that we're doing. So that's, to me, my vision for our sector and for consumers in general. Tony, what's your vision?
My vision is that people get a lot more intimate with their food and understand it on a deeper level. And instead of kind of living in the space of guilt and fear, when we talk about food waste, it just makes people feel terrible. And instead of getting stuck down in that guilty feeling of what you've thrown away, is to really get curious and start to understand your food as a living thing that requires different care depending on the food that it is. So I hope for like a much more curious consumer that is putting the power of food back in their own hands.
Amazing. Nita, you have 20 seconds left if you want to close us out.
Very similar. I would really like for people to know every bit of material that goes into making a product. And my end goal is to make sure that people, look for safe, simple, sustainable solutions. So it's got to be without the chemicals. It's got to be simple to use every day. And we need to look at sustainability through the entire life cycle.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm so pleased that you were here to hear our stories and support us and be a part of this whole SheEO conference. And I look forward to seeing you at another session in the future.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.